Hey guys, Coach McGuire checking in with you guys. I hope we're all getting through quarantine as well as we can. This week I'm going to be making the videos. I know all of us were in different spots depending on if you're in Mr. McPartland's class or Ms. Bertram's class or my class. So we're just going to do a review of this. This is going to be part of a web quest that you need to do. But this is going to contain all of the major information that you need. I will also attach the slideshow without the narration. So if you just want to click through the slides, you can do that as well. So to start out World War II, we have to think back to World War I, and we have to remember that with the Treaty of Versailles, the Allied powers put a lot of burden on the Germans. Their economy never fully recovered. That got compounded with the fact that all of Europe was affected by the American Great Depression because the Americans were big trading partners with many of the European powers. So the American Great Depression, along with the Treaty of Versailles, had left Germany and a lot of Europe in a rough spot. Because of that, we see dictators rise to power in many of the countries. Hitler is able to take over Germany by promising them German pride, by promising them power, and by promising them food and shelter. Benito Mussolini does kind of the same thing, and Hideki Tojo mirrors that in Japan. These dictators are fascists. So we're going to talk about another dictator during the war, Joseph Stalin, but he was a communist. These guys are fascists, all right? So the government is in control. It's extreme nationalism and extreme military pride that is at the forefront of fascism. Next thing we need to talk about is isolationism. America did not want to get involved with another war in Europe. It was the same stance, if you remember, that America had before World War I, and if you remember with the sinking of the Lusitania and the Zimmerman telegram brought America into World War I, a similar thing is going to happen with World War II, but America wants to remain isolated, right? They're doing fine on their own, well, not really fine with the Great Depression, but they don't want to get into a worse situation by joining the war in Europe. Because of this, many Americans supported isolationism, and what's passed is a series of neutrality acts. There's actually three, but you're just going to have to remember neutrality acts. And basically what these did, they made it illegal to travel to countries that were at war. The acts called them belligerents, which meant they were fighting. It made it illegal to sell weapons to any country that was at war, and no loans or no loans or credit could be extended to countries that were at war. Even though America wanted to stay out of the war, they would prefer the Allies to win over the Axis powers. Now, appeasement. Hitler took over in Germany in the early 1930s, and what he started doing was taking a march through Europe and claiming land back. As we look at this map here, you can see with the map here that Hitler actually is able to take some land that he claims was German territory, Slovakia, the Sudetenland, and then the final straw is going to be up here with Poland. All right, when he takes Poland, France and the United Kingdom had agreed that they were going to come in and back up the Polish people. But like we talked about, this was the practice of appeasement. So as we talked about, Hitler expands into the Rhineland, the Sudetenland, Austria. In the Pacific, Japan expands into China. Now, the main reason for this is because Japan does not have a lot of resources and China does. So they knew that they had to expand into China to get the resources they were going to need to fund their empire. Italy is going to attempt to expand into Africa by taking Ethiopia. So all of these fascist leaders are trying to expand their empire to expand the reign of power they have. All right. And like we talked about a few minutes ago, Hitler eventually invades Poland to start World War II. His strategy is called Blitzkrieg, which meant using tanks and using planes to quickly swarm the enemy and get them to a point where they couldn't fight back. And the Polish were screwed. They came out to attack German tanks with horses, and Hitler is able to take over Poland quite quickly. As the war starts ramping up, like I said, even though America remains neutral, they'd still prefer the Allies to win. So the first acts were the Cash and Carry Act, which is kind of like going to pick up pizza. You come get it, you pay for it, except imagine it with guns. That's the Cash Carry program. Then we have the Lend-Lease program, in which America would give goods to Britain and France under the guise that they would pay them back. America knew that they probably weren't going to get paid back, but they figured it was in their best interest for the United States or for the Allied powers to win the war. But FDR, Franklin Roosevelt, knew that a war was probably coming, so he would implement the first peacetime draft in history, which was called the Selective Service Act. And also, in order to cut off supplies to Japan to keep them from expanding, he places sanctions on Japan and stops trading raw materials with them. All right, so America's not officially entered the war yet. We're going to talk about it on the next slide. But the four powers were the four allied powers were the United States, France, Great Britain, and Soviet Union. Now, France, it's important to remember, they had gotten taken over pretty quickly. So before America enters the war, the fighting was left to the Soviets on the east and the British in the west. Now, if Germany would have been able to take over England, they probably would have been able to turn on the Soviet Union and have a chance to win the war. But the fact that they fight a two-front war is going to end up being very costly. Now, like I said a few minutes ago, Stalin was the leader of the Soviet Union. Now, he was also a dictator, okay, but he used communism rather than fascism. And then the fascist powers we already talked about, you had Germany, Italy, and Japan. So you have the stage set. Obviously, there were other countries involved in this war, but these were the major powers involved in the conflict. Now, the thing that pulls America out of isolationism is the attack on Pearl Harbor. Japan realizes that at some point the United States is probably going to get involved in the war, so they want to cripple the United States fleet, and to do that, they launch a surprise attack. And this was months in the making. It was successful. They destroyed most of the battleships. However, the American carriers were out to sea, which meant that America would still have the ability to launch aerial attacks with their airplanes in the Pacific. But after this attack, the United States will enter the war. Once America enters the war, there's a huge ramp up, all right? And the main thing to realize about this war, yes, we had good soldiers, great soldiers, not good soldiers, great soldiers. We had great generals, but America is able to win this war because they are able to produce more goods in the Axis, and they're able to mobilize the home front better than any other power. Okay, government gets involved with production. The War Production Board tells each factory what to produce. Much like with this coronavirus, where a lot of auto manufacturers are turning to making ventilators, the president told each industry or each factory what thing they were supposed to produce. In addition to telling factories what to produce, the government implements rationing, which helps conserve materials like rubber, meat, and gas, which were needed to fight the war effort. During this, the national debt goes way up, but pretty much everyone that wants a job gets a job. So we talked about the New Deal helping end the Great Depression. The thing that really did end the Great Depression was the fact that America ramped up for the war, and propaganda was used all over the place to help encourage people to support the war effort by buying government bonds to help with money for women to take jobs in factories. You know, if we go back to that intro slide, you see Rosie the Riveter. All of this propaganda was put out by the government to help people show that we were winning the war and we were doing the right things. Another thing that's important to think about is the civil rights movement. It hasn't taken place like it does in the 1960s and 70s, but there's a lot of progress made, even though there's a long way to go. Many blacks moved north in search of jobs in the factories that have been vacated by many of the white men who have gone off to fight the war. One of the more impressive things that takes place is there's the Tuskegee Airmen, which was a highly decorated group of black pilots who went over and fought and pushed boundaries of what people thought the black population could do. The main thing that the black Americans pushed for was the Double V campaign. They wanted victory against fascism, and they wanted victory against racism on the home front. So they wanted to beat the bad guys overseas, and they wanted to win the hearts and minds of the Americans so they could get equal rights. Another thing is the Bracero program allowed Mexican farmers to come to America and work because many of the farmers were out fighting the war. Native Americans also played a huge help in the war effort, especially with the Navajo Code. This was an unwritten, secret Native American code that the Japanese were never able to break, which gave the Americans a huge advantage in the Pacific. Sadly, though, Japanese Americans were placed in internment camps, which were basically giant prisons. They were placed there because America didn't want to deal with any spies. You know, it's sad when you think about it. German Americans weren't placed in internment camps, and Italian Americans weren't placed in internment camps. So really the only non-white enemy we were fighting were the only Americans that got put in the camp, and it was upheld by the Supreme Court case of Korematsu versus the United States, in which they said it was allowed. Women also gained rights during this time because they were able to work in the factories. Obviously, very classic piece of propaganda, Rosie the Riveter, encouraging women to go and fight. And women built bombs, they built guns, they built planes, they built tanks. You know, this was a big opportunity for women to show how much they could do. So we're not going to go over a lot of the actual strategic part of the war, but just an idea. And on the next slide, I'm gonna draw some of the basic things that happened with strategy. The Allies would attack through Africa and Operation Torch. That's North Africa. America didn't want to go and start by attacking France like they would at D-Day because they knew their troops would not be ready to face the German troops who had already been fighting since 1939. If you think about it, this attack happens in 1942, so the Germans had been fighting for almost 3 years. And throughout the war, the Allies would bomb the Germans through the air. America and Britain suffered huge losses through these bombing efforts, but they were able to slowly wear down the Germans. Like we talked about, America was just able to produce more planes than the other side, so they were able to wear them down. America is able to move through Italy and move south, fighting against mostly German forces. But the big punch that the Allies are able to have is D-Day or Operation Overlord, where the Allies are able to get a foothold in West Europe. They're able to march through Europe and take France. Hitler's going to make one last attempt in the Battle of the Bulge. It's called the Battle of the Bulge because there was a bulge in the line where the Germans were almost able to push through. But the Americans are able to stop that, able to fight back, and eventually meet the Soviets in Berlin, ending the war in Europe. Sadly, along the way, Allied troops discovered the concentration camps in which 12 million people were killed, 6 million of which were Jews. And one sad statistic is there's a camp called Dachau, which was so efficient, they almost closed it down because they had pretty much killed every Jew in Poland. So the Nazis were extremely efficient in this, and it was really a sad thing that happened. All right, so America is going to start by attacking here. So as we can see through this rather crude drawing, America is going to land here and attack through North Africa and work their way through. Now, this was not easy because there was a really good German general named Rommel who caused the Americans a lot of effort, but America is able to make their way through. And actually, if you look over here, all right, you see the Suez Canal, which America is able to get hold of, and it's important because that down there will lead to the Indian Ocean, which means a lot of goods can be put through here because this is the Mediterranean Sea. All right, but America is able to work their way through. They attack in Sicily and work up through that direction, and then are able to attack. But they kind of get stagnant here, and the Allies understand they need to be able to retake France and push through. And then, as you can see, the Soviets are pushing through from the east. All right, so America is going to attack here through D-Day, like we talked about. The Germans have what was called the Battle of the Bulge, and they're able to attack back through here. This is not ideal, but basically they were able to get a bulge in the lines, okay, but America is able to push back and survive. Hitler was smart. He attacked through the Ardennes Forest, which was lightly defended, but America is able to rally. And as you can see, eventually through these 3 points, they're able to pinch the Nazis. The Italians were already defeated, when America marched through and the Allies were able to win their war in Europe. So with the battle in the Pacific, Japan got the early victory, obviously, with Pearl Harbor, but America is able to strike back very quickly with the Battle of Midway. In this battle, America destroys 4 Japanese aircraft carriers and 300 planes. All right, so this was a huge victory for America to turn the course and start attacking back toward Japan. And what they'll do that with is a strategy called island hopping. So we'll go from one island to the next island to the next island, all the way to the Japanese mainland. What the Americans encounter is with each island they take, the stronger the Japanese fight back. And it gets so dire that the Japanese actually start loading their planes with explosives and flying them into ships using kamikazes. And through this, America realizes it's going to maybe cost millions of American lives to take the Japanese mainland. So they turn to the atomic bomb and bomb the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, where hundreds and thousands of Japanese were killed. Truman made that decision basically because he believed if he was able to make that attack and get Japan to surrender, it would save American lives. Japan does surrender, and with that, the war in the Pacific ends. To wrap things up, in Europe, there's the Yalta Conference where the winners talk about what will happen. Germany gets divided into 4 regions. There were supposed to be free elections in Europe. This will break down as the Soviets do not hold up their end of the bargain and start to provoke the Western powers, which is going to lead to the Cold War, which we'll talk about in the next unit. The reign of FDR ends with him dying towards the end of the war and his vice president, Truman, taking over. And then the last thing of the war is the Potsdam Conference, where the Allies decide that they are going to prosecute the Nazi war criminals at the end of the war and bring them to justice. So that's really it. If you have questions, make sure you're reaching out to your teachers or ask in the comments or on your classroom page. Thanks for listening, guys. Have a good day.